Ben Riggs presents Reading D&D Aloud. Episode 57, Commander Shephard in Ravenloft.
Greetings, assembled internet hordes. It is I, once again, Ben Riggs, apparently controversial D&D historian, and I am here today to shepherd a conversation to you. The theme of today's conversation is Ravenloft, but I don't think that's the best place to actually start introducing my guests. Instead, I am going to say that I have a very addictive personality. So I only play one video game about every 3 years. But one of the video games I have played is Mass Effect. And with us today is the accomplished Canadian voice actor, the voice of Commander Shephard, the male voice, and probably the most real-world famous person I will ever have on this podcast, Mark Meer.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I'm already an illustrious company, so I'm not sure I deserve that billing. But thank you. Thanks for having me.
Ah, that's I get to go to Canada every summer and winter to visit my in-laws, and I never fail to be charmed by the humility and kindness of the Canadians as a group of people.
Well, thanks for saying so.
So another one of the video games I played is Skyrim. And with me today is the lead designer of Skyrim, a game which generated more income in its first week than TSR did in its best year, the co-creator of Ravenloft and lead author of the 1990 Ravenloft box set, Bruce Nesmith.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I am also in august company.
Last but not least, we have author of the Ravenloft novel Knight of the Black Rose, editor of more books than I can list, alumni of TSR and Chaosium, James Lowder.
Hi, folks. Thank you for having me. Hey, Mark, you got to do the voice of Cyric too, right?
Oh, yes, actually, that was not my very first voice work ever, but close to it.
It was way
Yeah.
up the top. So that super weird being on a podcast with somebody that did the voice for a character I helped create. So,
Well, I have to say again, I'd played some nameless ball spawn cleric up to that point, so getting to play Cyric, who was a character that I'd read books about, was a real thrill.
And Jim, could you refresh us where Cyric is from?
Cyric is from the Avatar trilogy, The Forgotten Realms, which was originally designed to explain the transition from first to second edition D&D, and it became originally a novel trilogy that spun into modules, comic books, lots of other stuff, and ate my life for a couple of years because I was the coordinator for all of the Avatar stuff
In a
and
good way.
co-wrote Tantris. Oh, absolutely. The dictionary makes a fine pillow when you're sleeping in your office back at TSR and Sheridan Springs Road.
So I'm hoping this becomes a conversation instead of some sort of joint interview, but I'm going to start with this thought. Bruce, I revisited the 1990 Ravenloft box set last night, and the first few pages dive directly into the themes of Gothic literature, of sin and damnation and evil, and the thinnest wisp of redemption. And reading it at 46 instead of 14, it strikes me as a bold departure for D&D. And I would ask you if you can tell me anything about those dark themes or the innovation that you brought to Ravenloft to get us going.
I would be reluctant to say that we totally innovated there. Tracy Hickman wrote a marvelous adventure, Ravenloft. Without any doubt, the best-selling second edition adventure ever, and extremely popular. And it was a case of we wanted to turn that into something more. Tracy had moved on to greener pastures at that point, so I was fortunate enough to get the call to make that. In addition, Vampire the Masquerade had proved to be a huge hit. So those are probably the twin prongs of inspiration there. And that intro that you're referring to, I have to give a lot of credit to Andrea Hayday for that. When the writing rises to a certain level, you know her hand was fairly strong in there as opposed to mine. But when you talk about departures, I'll tell a quick story. The first manuscript we turned into Jim Ward, who at the time was the director of the design department, uh, he read it and he turned it back to us and said, "Where are the rules?" Because the whole idea of something that was flavor was alien to role-playing games in a lot of ways. I mean, Vampire the Masquerade was certainly leaning heavily into it, but they also had a fair amount of rules. And to be fair, Jim was also right. For the time, it needed to have more rules. So we had to go back and add more rules into it and send it back to him, and then he accepted it. And for that time, and for quite a while after, it remained one of the most rules light campaign settings TSR ever did.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I mean, it was heavy on the setting and the characters and the mood
Mood.
was what drove it, right? I mean, and that
Yeah.
was, and then that became the debate in the company was how dark can we make any of this? It's the whole Ravenloft Doveloft debate, which really kicked off after you had left. I mean, because
Oh, okay.
initially, the team was Bruce and Andrea and Bill Connors.
Yep.
That was the core for the game side. And they decided, upper management, Jim Ward and Mary Kirchhoff decided we were going to kick off a fiction line. And they decided the first two books were going to be Vampire of the Mist and Night of the Black Rose. And they handed, that's what I got handed as the person who was going to take over the fiction part of it. And the first conversation I had with Bruce was when you were working on the revision of the rule set, and I came in to see if there was a way for us to not make it Lord Soth. Can we make Sithicus not Lord Soth? Because I was trying to get that book not to be not Lord Soth
Wow.
because it was a Margaret and Tracy character, and I didn't think it was a good idea, and it was going to put constraints on the fiction that didn't exist for Vampire of the Mist, because Christie got to create Jander Sunstar for that book, and he was the protagonist, and Strahd was the background character. And so, yeah, the first conversation I had with Bruce about any of this was, "Hey, I'm taking over the fiction line. Can we make this not Soth?" And sadly, the answer was no.
Yeah. And Lord Soth is arguably the most difficult character to fit into the Ravenloft scheme.
No kidding.
He did not he did not have the classical emotional weaknesses that defined a lot of the other Ravenloft characters
Yep.
or Dark Lords, who are supposed to be these broken men of power, and he was not.
Right.
And I don't remember the conversation in the detail I think you do, but I do remember going, dude, I don't know how you're gonna do this.
And that was, yeah, and it was, and that was the problem was
Yeah,
Games agreed basically that, gee, we would love to have a different Dragonlance character come over and be that Dark Lord, or create one and tie it to, because that was always, the way you wanted to go with it, right? Create a character
yeah,
and then you can mold it to the setting. But it was fiated from on high that this was
yep,
going to be Soth, because Soth was such an interesting character and not enough had been done with him, and we can do something cool. And we were all stuck trying to make that work.
I think it came off pretty well. I mean, it was a challenge, and you guys definitely had your work cut out for you. But in the end, I think it turned out as a good book. I did not read a lot of the Ravenloft stories, but I read those first two.
Yep.
I'm still jealous of Christie's opening. I wanted to think of that, and I didn't. She did.
Yep.
Um, but
What was the opening?
if I remember correctly, they end up waking up in a coffin and have to dig their way out, or maybe it was a sarcophagus and they had to break out of a mausoleum.
Yeah, she
but
did that. Yeah, I mean, Christie did amazing things, and that was actually Vampire the Mist was her first novel.
Holy cow.
really, I didn't know
Yes,
that.
I discovered Christie in the slush at TSR. Christie, Elaine Cunningham, Mary Herbert are all people that I discovered, in slush, and
Cool.
and Vampire the Mist was her first novel. She got to audition for the book.
It was
Uh,
pretty good. I remember enjoying it.
yep, and she did a terrific job. And yeah, so and then we had a different author for Night of the Black Rose.
Who was that?
Mike Cullen. I can say the name because there are book covers with Mike Cullen's name on them floating around out there. And that didn't work out. And Mike got replaced, and we tried desperately to get another author, and we couldn't. And I ended up having to write the book, even though I didn't want it to exist.
I have questions about how you create a book that you didn't want to exist. But I'll tell you that the end result I really enjoyed. I inhaled it back in the day. It was absolutely delightful. And I'll ask Mark, how did you get into Ravenloft? Oh, you're muted.
It wouldn't be a podcast without me doing that.
It's
So
okay.
I played the original module back in the 80s. And yeah, the very first time I played it, we didn't even make it past the first big gargoyle encounter, just slaughtered, instantly slaughtered. But I think that made the module intriguing. So I did get a chance to play it again and go further into it. And I'd always been into that genre. The big horror movie fan, the classic stuff, especially, the old Universal monster pictures and Christopher Lee's Dracula films with Hammer. So that really appealed. And the more the stuff that came out from Ravenloft, I just kept buying all the Ravenloft stuff, even when I didn't get a chance to play it. When I think the most I bought was probably all the third edition stuff, and I wasn't really in any active campaigns then. I was just buying all the gazetteers, and I enjoyed Ravenloft very much, and still do.
It was I believe, the second most popular campaign setting after the Forgotten Realms.
Yep.
It was number one in my books.
Well, and it
People who liked it said it was number one for them too. It's
Yeah.
just more of them said that about
Yes.
Forgotten Realms.
Yes.
well, I mean,
No
the other
offense to
part
Ed.
of-
No offense to Ed Greenwood.
Oh,
I love
yeah.
Forgotten
Oh
Realms
no,
as well. But
I've lived
Ravenloft
in,
near and dear.
yeah, I've lived in both of those worlds and was the series editor for both of those fiction lines at one point. So it's all good. They're both good. The one of the things that was interesting about the way Ravenloft rolled out was it was coordinated games and fiction
Mhm.
right from the start.
Which had never happened before.
Right, which because the Realms box set had come out and there was fiction attached to it, and the fiction that was attached to the Realms initially, Darkwalker on Moonshae wasn't even a Forgotten Realms book. It was written for a whole nother thing that Doug was working on, and was the Moonshaes were grafted onto the Realms. And the original Dragonlance stuff and coordinated with the game things were done by the same team. But what was different about the way Ravenloft happened is, Christie wasn't in the building. Christie was
Correct.
a freelancer completely outside the company.
As
And
was true for most of the authors.
which was true, growing, starting in 88, when we started doing auditions and getting Bob Salvatore and Scott Siensen and Christie and Elaine Cunningham and the other people who came in. Those were all people who came in through Slush. Unsolicited manuscripts are called Slush. And then they auditioned and got the fiction assignments. But for Ravenloft especially, it was very tightly coordinated. Partway through the box set, fiction was in. We knew what the first two books were going to be, and Bruce and Andrea and Bill read those book manuscripts as they were being done, and that stayed true for the first several books. It was all very carefully coordinated between books and games.
I still have a proof copy of I Strahd somewhere.
Right.
So, Mark, were you a Ravenloft DM or a Ravenloft player?
Player first, and then later DM. And I found myself gravitating, away from Barovia because I felt like Barovia was covered. It
Hmm.
gets the most attention. Darkon always really appealed to me.
Yeah, no, that's
And
the Lich one, right?
yeah, Aslan
Yep.
Rex.
Yep.
Azra.
Uh, and yeah, I'd read, Aslan had been in some of the books as well, and of course had
Yep.
showed up in I think the second module, the Griffin Hill one, I think.
Very peripherally, yeah.
Yeah, he's
Uh,
barely in it.
yeah,
But
I-10, he was kind of like the background mover and shaker, but you never really deal with him directly, if I remember correctly.
yeah, so the DM side of it was me fleshing out Darkon using some published materials, but also just sort of building my own version of Aslan. And eventually, I guess a few years ago, I got to essentially play Aslan when we did Black
Mhm.
Dice Society for Wizards of the Coast. So that was fun, getting to be a PC and one of my favorite NPC villains. And then I also ended up getting to be Firanz Alhonen for reasons that anyone who knows Aslan would easily deduce.
And what is that experience like? Like you get to embody a character that you'd read about before. I mean, uh,
And DM'd.
yeah, like
Mhm.
holy
Right.
cow, what was that like for you?
Oh, fantastic. It was a dream come true. I owe it to B. Dave Walters, of course, who, when he actually first contacted me, I thought I was just going to be Aslan as an NPC, and I was like delighted to get to do that. And then was told, oh, no, you haven't filled out your D&D Beyond thing yet. I'm like, I have to make him up as a character. Surely I can just use published stats or what. And discovered that I would also be playing a PC. And I had left it to the last minute, so everyone else had chosen all of the new cool subclasses and the things that the Van Richten's guide introduced, like Dompier and whatnot. So I was just like, I guess I'll be a human a cleric because nobody's playing a cleric yet, and ended up playing him as sort of a Frady Cat Ichabod Crane type, and then linking him into Aslan as well. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to get to play with the lore that way, and bring back some of the old deep lore as well. Because I introduced the thing that even though the current edition, the core doesn't exist anymore, Uriah, my character, remembered the core from when he was a child.
Nice.
And yeah, so you got to pay a little homage to the old stuff.
Oh, awesome. That's cool. Um, One of the reasons, I mean, and both Mark and Bruce have touched on this. I mean, one of the strengths for Ravenloft as a setting, as Bruce and Andrea and Bill put it together for the game, is the same reason the Forgotten Realms succeeded for fantasy. It's the variety of things you can do with the setting and
Mhm.
setting up the Dark Lords and doing, you know what, if you're done with Strahd and vampires, you can go over here and there's a werewolf thing you can do. And there are other types of horror that you can explore depending on the domain you go into. And being able to just have those breaks between the domains and the conflict between them gave players and GMs a lot of room to do interesting things for the people at their table.
I always thought that, and I don't know if I ever heard any information to say this is true or false, but I always felt Ravenloft as a campaign setting was a place you go to take a break from standard fantasy. That you could play the standard fantasy campaign, regardless if it was Forgotten Realms or Homegrown or whatever, for years, but that an adventure in Ravenloft would be a shorter term thing. Because sustaining that, it's not, in my opinion at least, it wasn't really sustainable. And so I was kind of surprised to hear some of the stories of people who did hop from place to place. And I never got a good handle on whether that was common or we were just hearing a few stories about it.
I've heard that's less common, but I've heard exactly what you just said, which is Ravenloft being the, now we play this for 2 or 3 weeks in between our
Yeah.
regular fantasy thing. It's like the way Call of Cthulhu gets played as a fill in between, play one night of
Yes.
Call of Cthulhu in between playing your D&D campaign.
Once you go insane, it's a little hard to keep playing your character.
Right? Yeah, I mean it's that downward. Well, and that comes back to that Doveloft Ravenloft thing that broke out, like I said, after you left. That was with David Wise and
Yeah.
lasted all the way up through the start of Wizards of the Coast, was an argument about how dark should the setting be. Should it be Ravenloft or should it be Doveloft, which is fantasy overlaid with some horror, but leaning more into the fantasy?
And that was always the challenge with writing the first box set is the very nature of Dungeons and Dragons is that you are the hero
Yep.
and you are heroic. We'll use movies as an example. In a horror movie, there may be a hero, but they are not necessarily heroic. They are not powerful and mastering their environment, which is the current definition of heroic that I'll use. The environment is mastering them. They are always on the back foot. They are always about to lose. And anyone who's been a DM, and I'm going to include all four of us in this conversation, players don't like that. They don't like being on the back foot. They don't like losing constantly.
Right.
And that's what classic horror is. So trying to find the balance between, well, you can be heroic, but you're also in a horror setting. That's that's a challenge. I mean, we wrote what we wrote. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in about a dozen different campaigns and see exactly how it went. My guess is the heroic side triumphed a little bit over the horror side in most cases.
Right. And that's the difference between Ravenloft as a horror game and Call of Cthulhu with
Yes.
the sanity mechanics and everything else. I mean, and that's I've always said that the kind of the model for the Ravenloft as we initially discussed it with the box set was Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter, the Hammer movie.
Yeah, that's probably closer. Yeah.
Which is right. So he's heroic, but the horror is in he doesn't understand exactly what the enemy is. The vampires can do all kinds of different things. Which vampire powers do they have? And that's the struggle. That's the conflict.
Yeah.
Could you give a brief description of that for the 12-year-olds that might be listening?
The Captain Kronos?
Yeah.
So he's a wandering swords person who goes and kills monsters in this sort of medieval setting with his hunchbacked assistant, who is a knowledgeable scholar. And the coolest part about that movie, especially if you're a Ravenloft fan, is they don't know how to kill. They know vampires exist, but they don't know how to kill them. There are multiple ways to kill the vampires, and they have to figure out which kind of vampire they're dealing with. And you can stab this one with a stake and it doesn't do anything. Oh, well, better try silver, better try. And then that becomes the source of the conflict. And some of the most grim horror parts of that movie, as they're trying to figure out how to kill one of their friends who has been turned into a vampire. And so it was originally intended from Hammer Studios in the 60s as a series. It was going to be a long series with Kronos going from medieval village to medieval village,
Monster of the Week.
finding different horrors, different, and it was very much the model for what Ravenloft as a dark fantasy campaign would have looked like versus a horror campaign.
You can think of it as the previous generation's version of The Witcher. The Witcher does a lot of this, a lot of the same things that you're talking about. They don't quite have the gothic horror style, but they do have a horror element to them.
Yep. And that's goes back to Robert E. Howard's character Solomon Kane.
I was just going to ask, was there any
Kane.
Solomon Kane influence?
Yeah. Yeah. Captain Kronos, you can definitely tie back to that Solomon Kane tradition. Absolutely. So that was originally the Ravenloft trilogy I was going to write. The Ebonok trilogy was originally going to be that Captain Kronos, Solomon Kane character as the main character, going between the three books.
I don't know if any of you picked up the most recent Wizards of the Coast Ravenloft book, but
the 5e1?
Yep, the 5e1, yeah.
Yeah, I've got it.
Yeah,
I've even played some of it.
Yeah, in the main I enjoyed it, but when you're talking about Ravenloft versus Doveloft, there is an illustration of Strahd and Aslan Rex in like melee combat with each other, and I was a little like, I don't know, guys. Like I know that Strahd, like he'll mix it up with some characters. That seems fine to me. I just don't know that these two guys that it would really come to fisticuffs. It again, they're both very cool
I
characters.
mean,
It's a very cool illustration.
by
I was
the
just like, I don't know, guys.
by the rules set out in the actual book, like that would be actually impossible for two
Yeah.
Dark Lords to ever, I assume some sort of celestial convergence might allow it to happen. And in that particular illustration, I assumed Aslan has cast Mordenkainen's sword and he's about to let it go so that it can
Well, it's kind
actually.
of a Batman versus Superman thing.
Hmm,
For me, Strahd was always Batman. He's the guy who is smarter than whoever he's going up against. And yeah,
Right.
he's got power, but that's not really what wins the day for him. It's because he's smarter. Whereas I always saw Aslan and Soth and guys like that more like Superman. They're
Oh
just
yeah.
raw, unbridled power, and their solution to everything is a sledgehammer. There's
Yeah.
there's no subtlety involved in anything they do.
And that was the two biggest challenges I had when I was writing Night of the Black Rose was to come up with a plot where I don't mess up the character
Yeah,
so that if Margaret and Tracy came back, they could reclaim him. Because that was one of my conditions for actually writing the book was they let me write it in a way that builds in Soth getting out of Ravenloft if Margaret and Tracy
yeah,
came back and wanted him as a character. And the other was he had to fight Strahd because he enters Ravenloft and he isn't trapped in his domain yet, so he can actually travel around the other domains and he encounters Strahd, and that was the other part of the book that they had said, well, this has to happen. He has to go have an encounter with Strahd,
yeah.
and that was well, you've got somebody playing chess and then someone who's a bulldozer,
Yep.
and and that's
Superman v Batman. We saw
it
that one.
is right, yeah,
Yeah.
Although,
and
and
that was
actually, I realized, yeah, that analogy is very apt because Strada's, of course, literally a Batman,
yeah,
uh,
but
or
He
can be.
is. This is true.
Yep.
This is true.
So and that was how I ended up writing that interaction. Really, was Soth came in to bust stuff, and Strahd figured out a way to outsmart him and send
Yeah.
him off after something else.
Wow. Um, so Bruce, is there any Ravenloft in Skyrim?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not literally Ravenloft, but the DLC, who's for those of you who've played
I
here,
played it. Yep.
okay. What's the name of the principal villain?
In Veilguard.
The
No, sorry,
vampire.
not Veilguard. I stole his clothes. I know that. I
It's
wore his clothes around for a long time.
it's Harkon.
Hark! Hey, of course, it's right on the screen in front of me.
So what happened there was the we couldn't come up with an acceptable name for it. And one of the other guys there said, "Well, I kind of like Bruce's screen handle, Harkon. That sounds great." I was like, "I'm not entering into this. If you guys want that to be it, you have to say so. I cannot vote for this."
For legally deniability, the plausible deniability legal reasons, I cannot suggest this name.
That's
Uh,
right. And then I warned them it's also a character in Ravenloft. By the way,
right.
one of my favorite characters, although
Mark on
I
Lucas.
don't think he ever appeared in anything, but I always really liked him. Um, so yeah, that was the whole idea there was let's do a vampire story but we're going to do Skyrim style vampires. And so I don't know that I'd say it's Ravenloft in there, but it's probably about as close as you're going to get.
That's chef's kiss. Mwah.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Oh, and
So
so sorry, I just realized I mistakenly said Veilguard earlier. Dawnguard, of course.
Dawnguard, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Veilguard, it was Dragon Age, the one that just came out.
Yeah.
That's right.
And the Dawn Guard were the guys who hunt vampires, and you get turned into a vampire. And in fact, one of the complaints is that people end up becoming vampires in Skyrim when you have that DLC, and they don't realize that the notifications weren't strong enough to you wake up one day, it's like you've been a vampire for 2 weeks, and like,
Oh,
what?
that explains the sunburn.
How
And
did this happen? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I did also enjoy playing as a member of the Dawn Guard because you got those
Mhm.
cool troll assistants.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
lots of
those are
fun.
fun.
I mean, Vampire Hunters should have been using trolls long before now.
Well, that takes the horror out of it. I mean, when you
Yeah,
walk
right.
into a place and you've got a pair of trolls at your back.
The solution there is then you just escalate the horror. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, that's
Yeah,
always
sort
that
of
point.
like the Space Marines showing up in Aliens and like they have all the hardware and it does
Yeah,
them
exactly. No,
no good. Yeah,
that's
they
right.
might as
Yeah,
well have just had the cat. Yeah.
that's
Yep.
that's the that's the point in the in the Call of Cthulhu game right before the final encounter where I'm gonna go get some dynamite. Yeah, sure. Uh-oh.
Yeah. Please,
For
by
all
all
the good
means.
that'll do you.
Hurry,
Box
go
of hand
ahead.
grenades, that's
You
fine.
get bazooka. Go ahead. Whatever. So yeah, I mean, well, so one of the other things, just in terms of, and this is the early years for the Ravenloft stuff too, is we coordinated. Bruce and I did the Ravenloft event at Gen Con in 1991.
Hmm. Yep.
Bruce wrote round one, I wrote round two, and Bruce taught me how to write stuff for a convention play because I'd never done that before. I'd done
The
stuff for
different beast.
yeah, right, and it went over super well. That was with the Stezin de Palarno, the character I created for Dark Lords, and again, that's an indication of how close we were all working together when that happened. That wasn't going on between other people in the book department,
No,
people in games. I was the one.
this was just us.
Yeah, this was just us. So I got to
Yep.
do a character, one of the Dark Lords for the Dark Lord supplement, simply because that's how closely we were all
Hmm.
working together. And
I
then
did
when
I did a few of the a few convention pieces.
yep. And we
So
did,
it
yeah,
was
we did those coordinated through Team
yeah.
Ravi and RPGA.
Yep.
So
No,
Bruce and I
I
wrote the one in 91, and then I wrote the three rounder with Stezin in 92
hmm
with my wife, who worked on that with me. And so yeah, those were a ball. And those were the first games that I ran for people I didn't know, because Gene had us running the games as well. And
Yeah, I remember running them.
yep,
And the beauty of writing for tournaments for conventions is you can tell a story arc that has a complete full stop, and
right.
you can do weird stuff.
So
The In the Flesh one that I wrote, you're a golem, but you don't know. So the whole thing starts off written as the point of view of how a golem would see the world. So the doors are all small in the cells you start in. The Dr. Frankenstein character that you first see looks angelically beautiful because you're hideous. And the players spend the first hour not realizing they're golems. And then when they figure it out, then the rampaging started.
yeah.
You
Well,
know?
and that's the scenario Bruce and I came up with for Stezin was at the end of the first round that Bruce wrote, all the PCs die,
Hmm.
and in the second round that I wrote, they come back as revenants,
Yep.
and all they can say is revenge. They can't say anything else but revenge. So you could go over to Mecca, where all of the RPGA tournaments were being played, and you could see that, you could hear the tables that were playing round two by people shouting revenge in different tones.
I should also give the context that Mecca was the expo center here in Milwaukee that Gen
Oh,
Con was
right,
at the
yes.
time.
Not that, yes, the other Mecca, the one in
Mhm.
Milwaukee.
I
Um,
visited that one in '87, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
yep,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one Milwaukee Gen Con I attended.
oh, there
Oh,
you go. So yeah, so that was and that's what Bruce was saying about being able to do that. You would never want to run something like that for
You couldn't do that to your
and
regular players.
yeah, no, but their PCs died in the first one, and they couldn't figure out now what's going to happen to us, and they come back dead in the second one. But then spend the whole second round of that figuring out how they're going to get their revenge on Stezin. So
but what a magnificent Ravenloft story that is.
right,
You know, it really, in addition to being a really awesome tournament scenario idea, the idea of your characters dying, coming back, and just saying a single word, that is not your usual AD&D. That is something unique, special, the kind of thing that might make Mark buy every book, even when he's not running a campaign.
No, it's the beauty of one-offs. Um, there's a lot of fun that can be had there that you can't do in a regular campaign. So and it kind of fits my view of Ravenloft as something that is an interlude between more traditional fantasy campaigns. Although the examples Jim and I were just talking about are a little extreme, but still.
Right, right.
So, Jim, let me ask you, unless you feel like you've already answered this, but I assume there's a more fulsome answer. Uh, Regarding Knight of the Black Rose, you said you didn't think it should exist for a number of reasons. All the other authors flaked out in some way, and suddenly it's your job to write this thing.
Yeah.
How do you sit down and write a book that you don't think should exist, and also have it turn out well at the end?
Um, Incredible luck, honestly. The first author didn't work out. We went through a couple of rounds of auditions to find somebody else to write the book. And meanwhile, I was using that opportunity to go to management again and say, it's cursed. See, let it go. Nobody, this shouldn't be happening. And they just said, no, it's a great idea. And look, we have this Clyde Caldwell painting now, which is an amazing cover. And Mary Kirchhoff, who was my boss at the time, called me into her office and said, there is only one person who can write this book and not mess it up, and it's you. And I know you don't want to hear that, but that's what I think this is. And part of the reason the auditions didn't work was all the people who were trying to write the book wanted Soth to change. It's what Bruce was talking about the nature of the Dark Lords having that flaw and having that realization, and that's where the dramatic tension came in.
And he has a flaw, but his flaw is not appropriate for Gothic horror.
Right. And so I turned the problems with doing the book and getting Soth out of Ravenloft without him being messed up, being changed, for Margaret and Tracy into the plot. It's a meta textual story. So, the horror for Soth in Ravenloft is he forgets his story and the people around him tell imperfect versions of his story. That's the domain that the Dark Lords come up with for him, is we're going to have people constantly spelling your name wrong.
Because you have to remember, the Dark Lords are being tortured,
right,
as well as being creatures of immense power and having total sway. They are themselves also being tortured, punished, whatever you want to call it, by the domain that they are forced to reside in.
right. It in some ways is going to be a manifestation of their sin. And his is his pride. And somebody who is really prideful, what's the worst thing you can do to them is make everybody tell their story wrong. And so he's got the banshees from the original modules, and I went through and did an incredible amount of research on this and unified all of the things for everything that had been published with Soth up to that point. Gave Margaret and Tracy the notes and everything else on it, because I respected what they had done with it. And that became the core for the book, which turned out to be a good choice. And that's the centerpiece for what Soth became in Ravenloft, was someone who was prideful and then punished by that imperfect history.
Wow. Well, I am gonna, I think, read from the 1990 box set. Although before I do that, I'm gonna ask Mark. And again, Mark, don't feel like you have to respond to this. But is there
Sure.
anything you want to ask these guys before I do that? Again, I feel like if I just shout that out across the internet, it may provoke panic in someone. So I don't want that to happen, because I'm ready to say something. But before I took up 3 minutes talking doing that, I wanted to ask if you wanted to ask anything.
Sure. Okay. Let's see. Secrets from behind the veil. Actually, are there any domains that were considered for the initial outset, or even like later on, that just got abandoned for whatever reason and have never seen the light of day?
I don't
Yes.
believe so. Jim may remember some.
Well, I created a whole one for Screaming Tower and the Ebonarch trilogy that I
That
ended
would
up
be
making.
later. That
That
would be
yes,
later.
for the initial one, no, right?
Yeah.
Because
We
that
actually
was all
struggled to fill all the islands that we needed to fill. The
yeah.
last couple of them were like, what do we put in here? I don't know.
And then the ones that were tabbed to be fully fleshed out later became Dark Lords. That became parts of the Dark Lord supplement.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that was the
Uh, what
initial set was
what
those.
about the one from later that seemed to provoke a laugh from you? So I
Well, I
assume
was
there's a
I
good
was
story.
going to do I was set to do a Ravenloft trilogy and had actually written a version of the first novel that got into this was after Bruce had left, that got into the problem of the head of the book department, new head of the book department coming in, me getting in political trouble with him, and then running afoul of the Ravenloft Doveloft argument in the game department. And so I quit the company shortly thereafter, withdrew the book, and fought with TSR for 3.5 years with legal problems, lawyers involved
Oh,
over.
so it was a
I just
rueful
quit the
laugh then.
company a year ahead of him.
And
So
Bruce had already bailed. So, but it actually ends great. I got the material back. When Peter Atkinson was solving problems after Wizards bought the company, Peter offered to publish the trilogy at Wizards, and paid me for my legal fees that I had spent on fighting TSR. But I decided that I was going to keep the material because I'd started publishing the short stories and other things connected to it on my own. And it was creator owned. So if you want to get a glimpse of what that domain is sort of like, there's a Paizo anthology called Worlds of Their Own, which has a bunch of short stories for creator-owned stuff by game designers, people that had been primarily game designers. And I reprinted a short story that would have originally been part of that Ravenloft thing.
Oh, cool.
So, so that one was going to be it was going to be the first Ravenloft trilogy in the fiction line. But when they switched heads of the departments in books, the new person came in and actually wanted to do away with the two people in the fiction line who were most closely associated with the line for the audience. And so my books ended up getting scuttled, and Christy Golden, who had written Vampire the Mist and a couple of other really great novels as well, was basically banished. They wouldn't consider any new works from her as well, because they didn't want the people writing the fiction being identified with, they didn't want the brand being identified with the people doing the fiction as strongly as
Gotcha.
it was. Same
and
thing
if you
happened.
want to know more about the politics at TSR, and there were all kinds of politics, that's when you go and read Ben Rigg's book.
Yes, read Slaying the Dragon for that. And the same thing happened with Bob Salvatore and Drizzt.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bruce.
So,
Appreciate it.
yep,
No, it was a political viper's nest. It really
it,
was.
it was. And more after you left, too.
That's the reason I left.
It is remarkable to me the politics that have swirled around Dungeons and Dragons, the corporate politics, I mean, or the office politics, as you might have it. Because it's while things are different at Wizards, it's still just politics, politics, politics. You know, I've been interviewing a lot of people that got laid off by Wizards in the past couple of years, and it really sounds like the creative team was interested in exerting control over the game, so that they could simply enjoy continuing to make the game themselves. And
Right.
there was an awful lot of office politics around, you know, I'm a good designer, but what if this person is better than me? I better cut them off at the knees and sh make sure they get fired or something,
Mhm.
as opposed to having them just, make stuff and maybe he's like, well, they're better than you, so we're going to fire you, which was really disconcerting and strange and icky and
That
uh,
the thing that was the best part of my tenure at TSR from 88 to 91, around that point, 90, 91, was there were teams like the Ravenloft team where that was completely not the case.
Hmm.
And the game people were supportive of Christie and wanted the fiction to succeed. And there was great collaboration. And you saw that in Dark Sun as well, which came together as a, multiple department, fiction, games, art, all of it. Um, the best parts of when TSR was actually firing on all cylinders was the points at which the teams in games and in fiction were allowed to work together and do that sort of collaborative creativity
Yeah.
in ways that were really respectful.
The content creators during, and I'm going to say the Lorraine Williams years, this is easy shorthand.
Right.
The content creation group, they all work together very well, from art to design to writing to, whatever it may happen to be. That group, they all felt a love for the game and they wanted to make good stuff and they knew they needed other people to help them make it be the best they could. Most of the politics of those years was at management levels and above and not at the content creation levels and below.
Yep.
And I have experienced some of what you were talking about, Ben, with other places where the content creation teams don't get along. They see it as a competition rather than a collaboration. And it's always unfortunate because it always tears everybody down and builds nobody up.
a quote that I love that is probably forever burned in my mind is Dale Donovan when he's talking about TSR, Dragon Magazine alumni,
Hmm.
Jakandor, I want to say the Island of
Yep.
Jakandor books were him.
Yep.
And he said, "Why aren't we still at TSR making things right now?" And it's such a cry of the heart to say that that was such a
Yeah.
great time. It was such a wonderful time in so many ways. I wish we were still doing it. And TSR really was a special place. And Wizards is and was too, but different and maybe not anymore. I
Well,
am.
I'll tie it back to our current topic. You can think about it like a Ravenloft Dark Lord. Extremely powerful, but flawed character in an environment that's torturous. How does that sound to you, Jim?
That's fair.
There
Yeah.
you go.
So, Mark, I mean, doing the actual play stuff
Hmm.
and doing the computer games, I would guess, and this is having seen some of the actual play stuff like at Chaosium when I was doing the background stuff on bookshops. That's actually where I see a lot of the really healthy collaboration going on. Do you see that in the computer game stuff and the voiceover stuff and the actual play that you do?
Certainly in the all the actual play stuff, I have been very fortunate, and yeah, but my players, whether I'm a player or a GM, I've had a great time doing all of them. Really, like the Chaosium stuff, the stuff for Wizards, and outside stuff as well. In video games, of course, it's a very collaborative process, but when you're an actor, you don't even see the other actors, so you go in and do your
Oh, sure.
recording separately. So even with Mass Effect, I was, doing my recording in Canada. Most people were in LA, but even the LA people were not recording together. So there's a little more it's more of a communal feel when you're doing an actual play
And that's
because
what, and that's, yeah, that's
it's like doing a
especially,
play. You're in the same room as everybody.
and watching the way in which a lot of the actual play people, and you included, work together on multiple projects and do different variations of the same, crews that you have. That says a lot about how much you enjoy working together.
Yeah, and
And I
it's
can,
it's a lot like theater companies as well. Like you'll
Right.
often see theater companies will work with the same actors again and again because it's sort of like, well, we enjoy them and they're talented, and also they don't microwave fish in the communal kitchen. So
I think one of the differences, as someone who's had a big footprint in both these worlds, when you write something for tabletop RPGs, there's a sense of ownership. I write a complete product. I write a module. I write a box set, whatever it may happen to be. That is me encapsulated in paper. Yes, there's other people that need to make it be a final product. They need to make the maps. They need to make the art. They need to do the editing. They need to do the cover design, all that stuff. But there is a wrapper around my work. That cannot exist in modern video games. You can't do all of that role yourself. I cannot do all the design work in a video game. I can't even do 10% of it. So you are immediately thrust into a position of it is a team. It is a large team in many cases. And there is no option to say, I own this. The ownership has got to be shared at a level that just doesn't exist in the paper publishing side of things. The tensions that you tend to get in the video game industry, and I was very, very fortunate, Bethesda did not have these. It was an extraordinarily collaborative environment. Um, Programming doesn't like design, design doesn't like art, art doesn't like programming. That's the classic tensions that you get because each group feels looked down upon by the other when it's a poorly built culture.
Right.
But you don't have the option to be a lone voice. You can't do it yourself. So it's not even a consideration.
Well, and when you look at this is the difference between the computer games with the massive number of people that you have,
Which is what I worked on,
and
yeah.
and the role playing games when you do things like the Ravenloft team. There
Hmm.
were editors and there were other people involved with this and writers and different things. But the way the products were structured, different people got to have spotlight in different projects.
Yes, yes.
And that was part of it as well. So, there were individual projects that Bill Connors wrote. And, Andrea was the person who was holding all of the game stuff together and making
Hmm.
sure things were consistent and, challenging people to do better on their writing. And I'm here and doing the right parts of what editorial is, which is I'm here to help you clarify your vision and make
Yeah.
this the best possible story or game.
That was
Uh,
a group collective ownership of a product line
yep,
as opposed to a product.
yep,
We
and
all owned the product line and that was considered to be a communal thing. And that doesn't always happen. And it didn't always happen at TSR either,
right,
but
right,
it happened very well with the Ravenloft stuff, at least through the years that I was there.
yep, absolutely. Well, and that was the foundation for it. So,
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I can't believe our time is winding down already. I'm gonna perhaps foolishly ask. So, what should our patrons go pick up of your work? What might put royalties in your pocket? I'm gonna start with Jim. I hope because he has the hopefully you have the easiest answer to that question.
sure. Well,
When's
for
the Screaming
Ravenloft,
Tower Kickstarter?
yeah, that's right. Yes, I'm still. The best part about that is I've actually got to use that character in a bunch of different things, and so it pops up all over the place. Um, Including he showed up as a an NPC in the Call of Cthulhu scenarios. You met him, Bruce. I mean, Ben. You met him in the game I ran. So for projects to go out, go give Night of the Black Rose a try if you haven't. It's still available in ebook and audiobook, and Tales from Ravenloft I think is still out there.
What's
And
your current work, though? What's the thing you're working on right now, or is just
uh,
out to the public?
wow, the last thing I did, let's see, I had a film essay in transgressive horror, and I had a nonfiction piece in, well, a fictional nonfiction piece in the Dagon collection from PS Publishing, which is a fictionalized auction catalog of the material grabbed from the Dagon cult at the end of Shadows over Innsmouth. And so I got to write a fictional auction entry for a book I made up, which the Geometry of Nowhere, which shoots through a bunch of my stuff as well. And so that's in print too.
So Bruce, do you get royalties on Skyrim? Should we all go buy another copy?
Please. Royalties? You've got to be kidding me. Bethesda treated me very well, but there's no such thing as royalties in the video game industry, and anybody who tries to tell you otherwise is pulling your leg. I don't believe there's royalties in the tabletop role-playing game industry unless you're freelance, and even then I kind of doubt it. It's usually work for hire.
It depends on what it is.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm out of the game business these days. I've retired from that, and what I'm doing now is writing novels, for which I probably should hire Jim as my editor.
They're super good. I read the Loki book.
Yeah, so I've got a trilogy, the Loki Redeemed trilogy, which kicks off with Mischief Maker, and Jim was kind enough to provide me a quote for it. I've got a Lit RPG series, for those of you who are familiar with Lit RPG, that I've got the first 3 books out. The other 3 will be coming out later this year. And I'm working on some other novels. That's my how I keep myself busy and entertained these days is writing novels that 300 or 400 people read.
So
good.
yeah, Mark, how can people support your work?
Well, let's see. I mean, of course, I am available on Cameo for all your Mass Effect catchphrase related needs. Let's see. Well, I mean, if you want to play Dungeons and Dragons with me in a castle, there's a company called D&D in a Castle that can help
Oh, are
you
you
out.
doing that? Oh,
I am, yeah.
I've seen the ads for that.
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah, I've been doing it since 2019, and I think I'm currently tied with Elisa Teague and B. Dave Walters for DMs that have done the most rounds at various castles. So they've just put the spring 2026 tables on the market, as it were, and one of my tables is already sold out. So I've got another spring session that there should be some tables available for. I also am running a game for D&D in a Castle at Gen Con called The Host, and I believe it'll be under the D&D in a Castle banner there. So you can, I think, still get some tickets for that. I'm not sure. Well, if you would like to watch a little Call of Cthulhu, I am the keeper of arcane lore for Bookshops of Arkham and Graveyards of Arkham, and those are mini-series that are available on Chaosium's YouTube channel, so you can check those out.
Wow.
Oh, and of course, the Black Dice Society continues to exist online, and it's concluded now, but you can go back and watch our Ravenloft adventure, which was, I think it should be on the Wizards of the Coast channel, yeah, or just Google it or put it into the search in YouTube. But you will find Graveyards of Arkham and Bookshops of Arkham on Chaosium's channel.
Well, gentlemen, this was a tremendous conversation. I can't thank you enough for your time and participation. It exceeded all my wildest hopes and expectations. And I just hope that you all have a great summer.
Thanks, Ben.
Yep, thanks, Ben.